You're listening to the Scaling Culture podcast, where we sit down with thought leaders who share their experiences building incredible workplace cultures. Our guest today is Lori Costew, Chief Diversity Officer and People Strategy at Ford Motor Company. In this role, Lori oversees the company's corporate diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts to cultivate a culture of belonging and advance the organization's mission and business objectives. She's been with Ford for nearly 3 decades and has leveraged her expertise in various positions. In addition to her leadership role, Lori is also an accomplished author of 2 award-winning novels that provide inspiration and tools against bullying. In this episode of Scaling Culture, Ron and Lori discuss Ford's intentional focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, strategies on how to develop deep listening amongst leaders, a diversity and inclusion audit, and why, what, and how behind Days of Understanding at Ford. This was a really unique approach we hope will inspire listeners.
Welcome to another episode of the Scaling Culture podcast. I'm your host, Ron Lovett, and today I'm extremely excited to have Lori Costew with us today, who's the Chief Diversity Officer with Ford Motor Company. Lori, welcome.
Well, thank you. I am super excited to be here.
Yeah, us too. I know we chatted a little while ago in kind of the pre-podcast, and when we started to talk about the topics, I will tell you, I was surprised and enlightened to know what we were going to discuss, because I didn't know that Ford was progressive on some of the items we're going to discuss today. So I'm really pumped about this episode.
It's definitely, Ron. It's absolutely critical to society, to communities, to our world, to our businesses. So thank you for allowing this platform to talk about this really, really important topic.
And it's great because nobody knows the topic. Everyone's like, what are they talking about? And they're really excited now. Everyone's like, okay, don't move. Let's hear it. And that's the end of the show. No, but before we go into the topic, Lori, I want you to rewind. Tell us how long you've been in this role, first off.
So I've been with Ford for 28 years. I hired in at age 12, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. But have been in this role for about 2, and it's evolved significantly. Diversity, equity, and inclusion has always been important and core to Ford, but since the murder of George Floyd and the social injustice that has really come to the forefront into the conversations, there's been a lot more focus and necessary focus on this topic. And, our leadership team is entirely committed, and we are all in on making it better for our employees, our customers, and just people in general.
So I want to play that back. It sounds like it was on the radar for Ford Motor Company, diversity, inclusion, equality. But now is really been a focus point. And it sounds like you guys have moved fast to that, because these things that you just talked about have happened in the last, 24 months or less in some cases.
Yeah, absolutely. And what people don't understand at times is that the terms are very different, but they're very important. So if you think of diversity, that's all about the different experiences, backgrounds, and thinking styles that people have. Inclusion is where people feel welcomed, valued, and supported. And equity is about providing that equal and fair playing field. And the equity concept is new for a lot. So we actually have a really simple graphic that we use to describe what equity is. And if you think at the top, at the top of the graphic, you see 4 of the exact same size bicycles. And you see a handicapped woman, a very tall guy, an average height woman, and a child. Well, of those bikes, the only bike that fits is for the woman.
Right.
But when you look at the bottom of the graphic, equity, giving people what they need, it's a bicycle equipped for a handicapped person. It's a tall bike for the tall male, and it's a child-sized bike for the child. So you're still giving everyone a bike, but you're giving them the bike that suits their needs. So that's what equity is. And
that's interesting. Oh, sorry. Keep going.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, because most companies, I feel, and I probably would be one of these, it looks like you've broken diversity and equity out where most have put those together. Or am I wrong?
We have, and you have to look at them differently. And because when you look at diversity, equity, inclusion, what the center of that is belonging. That's the intersection. And that's ultimately what every organization needs, is for everyone to belong. Because if you have a diverse company and you got lots of different people, but you're not listening to them and having them feel valued and included, they're not going to stay. So they're all critical to that sense of belonging.
Right. So you're saying that all of these things, if you get them right, kind of waterfall into belonging.
Absolutely. And belonging is such a fundamental human need. So go back to 7th grade. You're standing at the cafeteria door and you're anxiously looking around for that open seat at a lunchroom table with kids you know. And remember the pit in your stomach when you couldn't find an empty seat. So that feeling of fear and desire to connect, that is such a basic need. Everyone needs to feel like they belong when they're coming to work.
Yeah, absolutely. But to clarify, my 7th grade experience was more in the principal's office saying, please choose any other school but here to go to because you're very disruptive. No, I get that point. So, but you use the word North Star. Tell me more about that, because it sounds like that's important for the organization. Is this a new or old North Star?
So it's actually a new North Star for us, as we've really been peeling back. And when we look at our 4 DEI North Star, it's we are family, we celebrate our differences, we all belong. And this is where, Ford Motor Company is a 118-year-old, but still family-owned company. We lean into that family element. And it's interesting, when I started with the company, people would say, oh, you work at Ford's, as in the plural. And it took me a while. No, I work at Ford, duh. But it took me a while to realize, no, they're talking about that family company. You work for the family. And so we really lean into that. And to this day, we're 190,000 people who belong as part of a family. And so we leverage that strength into our North Star.
And I know deep listening, you brought this up in our pre-call, and this is important to the organization. Tell us, what do you mean by, can you describe what does deep listening mean? And then let's talk about how it plays a role at Ford Motor Company.
So there's a lot of components to the deep listening piece. And this isn't just the, yeah, I'm listening to you. No, when you listen deeply, you can do it in a corporation in multiple levels. You can listen to it through your data, being your pulse surveys, your engagement surveys, how are people feeling? But we also do it in terms of focus groups and listening sessions. So we're part of an organization called the CEO Action Pledge for Diversity and Inclusion, which encompasses about 2,000 companies across 85 industries, and is one of the requirements for being part of the CEO Action Pledge is you hold this day of understanding, because we know that our view of the world is shaped by our own experiences, and everyone has different experiences. So we wanted to really listen and understand those experiences. So last year, right before we shut down with COVID, we held a physical day of understanding. And we started with listening sessions where we put our senior leaders, the CEO and the direct reports to the CEO, in a room with homogenous groups of employees, whether it be women of color, African Americans, Hispanics, people young in tenure, people of faith, LGBTQ. And we told the leader to not talk, to not problem solve, but to be there to listen and learn. And the insights that came out of these sessions of what is it like for me to be a woman at Ford? What is it like for me to be an African American working here? Across all those different sessions. And that really, it created, I'll call it almost like a movement for us, in that the surprise that the experience that some of our employees have were not okay. We didn't want people feeling this way. We just last week had our 2nd day of understanding, and we broadened the listening sessions to our entire corporate officer population virtually. And again, the insights are tremendous. And the beautiful thing with the listening sessions is we know change doesn't happen intellectually, change happens emotionally. And so by hearing the true stories and how people are feeling, that's what really makes those connections to understand we need to take a pause and really think about what we're doing and how our employees are feeling.
I love that. My first comment is it's so nice to hear a business that's been around for, what was it, 150 years?
118.
118 years go through something so progressive. It's so nice to hear a company like this is miles ahead of some startups that are fast moving and progressive. I just think that's lovely. It's really nice to hear that. And so I'm proud of Ford Motors Company. And I think I'm going to go buy an F-150 today just for that.
Well, I will help you do that.
Thank you.
Love that.
But the other thing that I was going to ask you, but you answered the question very quickly, and I find this interesting because when you said that we were heading into the day of understanding with our leaders, I was going to ask you, did you have to train your leaders for that? But you hacked the system, and when I say that, you told your leaders you can't speak today.
You're right, and that's a little unusual for leaders because a leader's job is to solve issues, come in, get a perspective, and solve the problems. And so we had to create guidelines, and which in those guidelines really were the success factors. So number one, create a psychologically safe space. We wanted people to know it's okay to be vulnerable, it's okay to show emotion. And we really want you to be brave and share how you're feeling, because we can't make change if what we don't know. The second one was, around the leaders themselves, saying you need to sit and listen. You can take notes, you can ask clarifying questions, but that's all we want you to do. And then a real success factor was having a host in the room. So we trained the hosts to be able to kick off the meeting, tee up questions, make sure no one dominated the conversations, check the leaders when they were falling back into their habits of trying to problem solve. And then afterwards, we collected the themes, no specific person data, but collected the themes of what did they hear across these various sessions, so we know what we need to start addressing and how we can best help.
Wow. And a few questions. Were the facilitators, were they Ford employees or third party?
Ford employees.
Wow, that's great. So it was really this inclusive kind of exercise. And I love what you said. And I think you're spot on that change comes from emotion, right? And because a surface level version of this would be, hey, everybody, we want you to understand that there's different perspectives and you may be holding biases, but some people grew up differently and their lives are impacted differently from social injustice, et cetera, et cetera. But there's no emotion there. You went further. You brought two sides, two groups of individuals, leaders and other individuals, and that could share their own stories. The leaders had to listen, and I'm sure those stories were emotional and would have impacted and helped from a compassion, empathy standpoint, the leaders to truly understand and then drive change.
Absolutely. And if you look at neuroscience, there's been a ton of research in the last decade, last 5 years even, on neuroscience. And it shows that the brain processes rejection and inclusion in the same space in the brain that it processes physical pain. So this lack of belonging, it actually impacts the body in the same physical manner. So lack of belonging literally puts people in pain. And when you're in pain, you're not operating at your best level. And ultimately, it's going to impact your business results. So not only is belonging right from just a humanity perspective, it's how you have to do business if you want to be effective and grow your company.
Oh, I think that's well said. So keep going. I'm curious, where does this go now? So you take the information, you're looking for themes. Now what?
So we continue to do that. And shortly after the murder of George Floyd last year, as we had already kicked off these listening sessions, getting more in tune with our employee resource groups and talking with employees. When George Floyd happened, we really broadened listening sessions out of this particular context and asked all of our leaders to meet with their teams, because we had a lot of people in pain and wanted to help with that. And coming out of that, we realized, we've got groups of employees that really don't feel they belong, and we need to get more understanding and background around it. So we launched a pretty progressive DEI audit. We started in the US, and since we've rolled it out globally, where we've looked at qualitative data, meaning our policies, procedures, quantitative data around representation, engagement. And then we also did a deep employee voice of focus groups, looking at, deep diving into our pulse, doing different types of very specific surveys, and some deep ethnographic data and something we called a diary study, and really trying to understand where are those unique barriers that women, African Americans, Hispanics, and others are having these unique barriers impacting their employee journey. So if you think of the employee journey being all the way from recruiting and through exit, where are they having a different experience that's not positive? And that audit really helped us drill down into where are those unique barriers. And if you've ever heard of human-centered design, where it's you literally put the human right in the middle of whatever you're trying to design to make sure that you're not optimizing for anything except that experience. And we're developing prototypes. And being that the audit showed us that our African American and Hispanic employees were suffering the most barriers along that employee journey, we're developing prototypes to address these systems and processes. And then once we get the prototypes right, we're going to scale for everyone's benefit. So at the end, we're really going to have incredibly robust systems, processes that ensure everyone has that opportunity to really thrive in their career at Ford.
I'm shocked when you said prototype, only because, and I apologize for this, but I always think of large companies as when they make decisions, they move. And I am so impressed with the nimbleness and the strategy behind this, because I was, as you're talking, I'm thinking, okay, fine, you have the information. How do you execute on this? It's got to be such a complex beast because of the sheer size and complexity of the company. And you answered that beautifully. I mean, it's, hey, we're going to prototype this, get it right. We know it's not going to be perfect. We're going to adjust. Boom, we've nailed it. Now we're going, right?
Exactly. And that's, we're doing that now with our products, services, experiences. You think of just the technology now that's in vehicles, so we're really applying that same methodology that we're using on the business side to our employee experience.
100%. You're treating them like customers. You would do that with customers, with vehicles. I love that. I mean, most businesses don't treat employees like customers, just customers like customers. I mean, so it's just a great strategy. Can you, Lori, can you tell us about some of the challenges? What were some of the roadblocks as you went through? There had to be a bunch.
Oh, there's a lot, and we're still in them. We're still learning through them. We're still breaking through them. Just things even simple like, technology. What technology solutions do we have to make it easier to understand the skills and experiences our employees have? Bias, if you have a brain, you have bias. So, and how might we raise that awareness? And so we've been doing a lot of education in the DEI space, including with our Day of Understanding. We had 12 hours of programming, all of which were recorded. We had external and internal speakers talking about everything from, the hidden bias of good people to how and what is an ally and how do you really serve as an ally to others. Educating on intersectionality, and that's a new term for a lot of people. So,
what does that mean? Sorry, Laura, can you explain that term? I don't know.
Intersectionality. It's basically, we're not one homogenous thing. You're not just a male. You're a male and you're a dad, and you might be from a certain demographic background, but all those different things make up you. So, you look at, within our Globe employee resource groups, which is our LGBTQ group, they'll say, well, yes, I'm a man, but I'm also Black and I'm also gay. So but it's that intersection of all these different components is what makes me me. So it's really understanding and embracing that we're all not just one homogenous thing. As a woman, I can't speak for all women across the globe, but I have my own perspective.
Right.
So it's the education of these different concepts, and it's really been it's been enlightening. And we've had people go back and really try to understand what does it mean. And we one of my team members, she and I did a fireside chat as we kicked off the Day of Understanding, level setting even on terms. What do all these terms mean that people are going to be hearing about? And just because we may have something, we may be in a system that we call systemic racism, that doesn't mean we're all racist within the system. So it's really trying to help people understand and bring them on the journey, because this is new for a lot of people, while a lot of others have been living this their entire lives.
So a ton of education in this process.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm still learning every single day.
Well, I was going to ask that. So Lori, for you as Chief Diversity Officer, what was your biggest aha moment? Well, and maybe you've mentioned this already, but what was the biggest, wow, I didn't know this, or this is such a eye-opening thing as I'm going through this journey for yourself?
Where to start? I think one of them was when we really started hearing about the term white privilege. And I actually explained this in the fireside chat that we had. Was, I grew up with a single mom with 4 kids who was a nurse, and she worked all the time. And we were in a pretty low socioeconomic bracket. So I never really considered myself privileged. I started babysitting at 11 and working at McDonald's at 16. And, I've been working, ever since I was 11, never thought I was privileged. But what I didn't recognize is me being white, that just opened a lot of doors. So I've never been pulled over for driving while Black. And because I'm able-bodied and I'm right-handed, I don't have trouble navigating the world. And because I'm straight and because I'm Christian, I haven't been subjected to derogatory comments over time. But because I am a woman in a heavily dominated industry, I've had to force open doors at times. So whereas those other areas, my privilege helped me in ways that I didn't recognize before, I also recognize where I haven't had the privilege of being male in a male-dominated industry, and that's where I had to push more. So there's just, I think we're all on this incredible learning journey together. And for me, the whole concept of privilege is something that was just a huge aha moment.
Wow. Look, I just learned, I was thinking as you were talking, I just learned a lot as you were going through that. And I would agree, I'd be in a similar position to you in my own childhood. So that's very interesting. Wow. It's interesting. I look at Ford now as a company. I feel like you guys could spin off this as a business, and you just are really tackling this with intention.
That's such a beautiful word, and you're exactly right. If we're not intentional about this work, it will fall by the wayside. If we're not intentional with the words we use, we can offend people unintentionally. And so I think you nailed it. Intention is so important.
So Lori, what do you think? Let's just, Ford's doing a beautiful job, with you leading the charge. So congratulations. I just think it's beautiful as being part of this process. You must be very proud. But what do you think is the next big mountain? This one's not going away. It's going to take a long time. But if you look ahead, what do you think the next big topic is going to be?
I think this one we're going to be in this whole having this aspiration for everyone to belong. That's going to take time, because even if we get it right within Ford, we're still operating within a world where systemic racism exists, sexism exists, all the isms that are not that are not good. And so, is it just as a member of the world and member of society, I think we all need to keep our eyes open to this and really and step in and be allies and serve each other in ways. So it can't stop at the door of the company. We have to keep our eye on this, and we have to do the right thing, even when it's hard.
So yeah, I think what you're saying is there's going to be more complexity within this bubble, like within this topic, under this. And so these new things are going to pop up that we didn't know lived within there. Now we're going to have to deal with that as well. Correct?
Absolutely. And if you look at even Gen Z, the expectations of Gen Z are overall that they want to work for companies that they believe in the purpose, that are inclusive. And so I'll give you an example of the equity piece that's so important to that generation. And that generation is so important in the war for talent. And, back, when I hired in, no one ever talked about their salary. It was like a taboo thing. Well, now we find that a lot of our Gen Z employees are regularly sharing salary. And it's not because they're nosy. It's because they want to make sure people are being treated fairly and equitably. And so companies that do not embrace this, that do not lean into it, they're going to find themselves hard pressed to get great talent. They might get people to come in, but as soon as Gen Z sees that if it's truly not the purpose they believe in, and they don't see and feel they and their colleagues are embraced and valued and listened to and heard, they will leave. So it's truly a business imperative.
So I'm curious, I know it's fairly fresh, I'll call it, this new intentional focus, which I'm blown away by how Ford is going about this again. But are you seeing any impacts, results since this has been going on? What are you seeing in the business?
It's really interesting. We're seeing conversations that have never happened before. We're seeing that, because clearly as a company, we need to design products, services, and experiences that customers of every gender and background are going to want to purchase. And to do that, you have to have those experiences, that you have to have people that understand that, designing those products, services, and experiences. So, one of the things that I'd say in the last 6 months that we've really leaned heavily into is our employee resource groups, and leveraging their knowledge of their background and their groups and their passion for the industry, and getting them much more heavily involved in solving those business problems when it comes to marketing, to design, and ensuring that the voice is in that design. So are we designing and marketing and selling our products in a way that are appealing to different audiences? So that's one area that you tie it directly to business impact.
Wow. And I'm curious, because again, I label large company with heavy policy, right or wrong. It's in my head. And I'm not saying Ford is that company, but I think people would think about large companies like that. I'm curious, did you have to change any policy? So for instance, if we're driving diversity and inclusivity and safety, maybe the company had a policy that says no talking politics at work. Now we have to remove that. Was there any big shifts like that?
So we're working on that all the time. And that's part of our prototypes, because if we don't shift and change our policies and our practices and our procedures, then it's like wish management, right? If you don't build in, you're never going to make change if you don't build it in. And so that's the things we're working on, down to our policy language, and language matters. And so we're looking at all of our policies for what it could be unintended consequences and impact on people. Opening up and making it safe to share how people feel at work. So we're in the midst of that right now, and looking at everything as we unpack and uncover all these unique barriers along the employee journey. What does that mean from a recruiting perspective? So an example there is we're launching for all hiring managers inclusive hiring training. So if you're gonna hire people externally or even internally, you're going to have to go through this to really understand what does it mean to be an inclusive leader and ensure that you're checking your own biases, because everyone has a bias. I mean, if you have a brain, you have a bias, because that's how we've grown up. But you need to be able to check that. So we're really trying to put what I'll call those kind of circuit breakers in to make people stop, take that pause, and ensure that they're really doing the right thing.
I love that. Lori, I have so enjoyed this conversation, but before we let you run, is there anything that you also feel that's maybe impactful or interesting that we haven't talked about that is going on at Ford, or maybe outside of Ford?
I guess having been at Ford for so long, and some of the pride points I have as a company is we're really looking at this in a very holistic manner. And so if I look at it from an entire business perspective, we're right out front when it comes to human rights. We, from a sustainability perspective, it's kind of a pride point for all of us that Bill Ford was green before it was cool to be green. And we're leaning in. So, DEI is part of a larger ecosystem, because, Ford's aspiration is to be the world's most trusted company. And
I love that.
If you want to be the world's most trusted company, you have to be holistic in your approach and how you do that, whether it's the environment, how you're treating people, how you're treating customers. So it's a really high technology, yet high touch environment.
What a great lofty North Star. I just love that. Lori, look, thanks again for your time. This has been an incredible conversation. I've learned a ton myself. I'm so impressed with the work you're doing and what Ford Motor Company is doing. And it's been very enlightening. Thank you.
Well, Ron, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
For more information about Lori, please connect with her on LinkedIn. For more information about the Scaling Culture podcast or our upcoming book or masterclass, Scaling Culture, go to connollyowens.com. And if you're enjoying the Scaling Culture podcast, please subscribe and share. We'll be back next week with another incredible guest.